Okay, now we're going to be talking about Gothic, and I'm just going to hit the highlights. Um, but I like to do this in a lecture to talk about some things that the book really doesn't delve into real deeply. It does, but not in the way that I'd rather do it. Um, so, looking at the Gothic, now let's take a look at this building. This is Saint Denis in Paris. Used to be on the outskirts of Paris. What type of building is this? Okay, um, the windows are small. It's not very tall, although it does have this bell tower. It has arches that are round. Probably these are columns, even though you have this very broad pier here. If you look at it real close, it looks like an arch, and then a capital of an arch, and then down is a column to a column base. But that has no structural integrity to it. It's just all designed into the front. The structure is actually that pier. Okay, so there is a look of a Roman column, arches, small windows. So yes, it's Romanesque. Okay, so as we talk about the change from Romanesque to Gothic, we have to talk about this building. And the book talks about a little bit. I love the floor plan on page 193, that it really shows how it radiates out and how it's built there. Okay, they show you an interior, and I will go there now. But first, let's talk about Gothic. Okay, and I'll tie in Saint Denis here in a second. So with Gothic, what to look for? High ceilings, very, very, very high ceilings compared to the other architecture of the time. The pointed arch, it's a symbol of heaven also, but the pointed arch becomes very, very important, that we'll get into, that you can actually go higher and higher and higher with your construction due to having that point. Rose windows come into play, and the flying buttresses come into play, where the rose windows is just one design of using stained glass, and the flying buttresses come in as an engineering structure to keep these very tall buildings from falling over. And many did fall over. They collapsed in on themselves because they didn't have the structure, they didn't have concrete to know how to go higher. So the people of the time were not stupid, they were good engineers, they were just working with what they had at the time. Okay, and again here, the glory of God with stained glass, trying to go from dark buildings to bright and shining and glorious buildings with lots of light inside versus these small, dark, dank, candle-filled, lighted areas. Okay, so let's go back to Saint Denis. Okay, here's the front again, very Romanesque. You go inside, very Romanesque. These arches from here to here are rounded. We do have groin vaults here with the rib or rib vaults now. We start to see a little bit of a pointed arch, but in this area, it's very short. And the whole church was like that until it was renovated. And then in the renovation, they added something to it, and the abbot, Suger, who ran Saint Denis, he's attributed with this design where he wanted to make it more glorious. So imagine standing here in this small building, but then they have this renovation and you're standing in the same place and you walk out this way. And what do you see but this? instead of this small building with little windows, it's big, it's tall. The walls are now made of glass instead of stone. So how is that done? The roof is held up by these piers here, these structures, and then they create this rib that goes up to this point. So these become columns that hold the weight. So from here to here is an arch, and it's pointed. Okay, because it's pointed, you can go taller and taller. If this were a rounded arch, it probably wouldn't have been able to go higher because there's so much stress of weight on the middle part, it will collapse. By making the pointed arch, where the point hits, the arch is still traveling upwards. That means that the weight of this part of the ceiling, instead of pushing down right here more, it's pushing down towards this point. Okay? So that allows the weight to be held up by these piers, and that allows the wall now to become light, so light that you can actually put windows in, that is made of glass. This is not load bearing, this is load bearing, the pier. Okay, a few other images. Another look at Saint Denis, very different from what had been the normal church of that time. Okay? Talking about how the forces moved down all of those. Okay? Here's one of the, well, actually the tallest church, 157 feet here in the nave of the church. Okay? The width gets a little bit wider, but it's the height that gets higher and higher and higher. And up here we have glass on the top, and all around the church, just stained glass. Probably one of the greatest Gothic cathedrals is Chartres Cathedral. And I like to show this, that even today the cathedral dominates the land. Here we are on a farm miles away, but we can still see the body of the nave of the church, and then we can see the two towers on the front, the two bell towers. So let's take a look at it up close, and here it is. Another aerial view. I really like this view for many reasons. One, you can see the detail here on the two towers, that they're different. One is very plain. This is a pyramid form, actually a bit Germanic. And then we have this other one that's very flamboyant, both very Gothic. Okay, the left one was later during a time when the Gothic style, and it actually is called flamboyant, where it's very open, it's airy, it's very lace-like. Okay, so two different periods of time because it took that long to build this great structure. Now another thing that you see here is the cross form or cruciform, where we have, remember the basilica has a nave, then it has aisles down the side, would be here on either side. And then you have the crossing, okay? And instead of being here, it's been moved down about a third and it becomes more of a Latin cross design. Instead of a capital T, almost like a lower T or a Latin cross view. Also here you can see the rose windows here, here, and there would have been another one on the other side. So one of the grand and greatest Gothic cathedrals. Won't go into all the details, but look at these buttresses. Now, these are technically flying buttresses. This wall becomes so high that they need something to hold the wall up on the exterior. So instead of having a very thick, ugly wall, they need light to still get in, so they create these small segments of walls where this is a pier, and then there are small arches or half arches going up to the wall to hold it up. So you have this sort of design here all the way down. Okay, you can see it here You see the buttresses here, and these X's on this floor plan show that where there are groin vaults or ribbed vaults. So the interior basically is made up of these piers going up. Okay, here's an aisle, here's the nave still. Okay, and up here within this very glorious apse would be the altar. And from this other side, from the west, you can see the two towers, the rose window, and the portals, which are actually the three doors, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And as we go back here, you can see that there's also a portal on the north and the south side. Now, another thing that happens here is this is the west side. The altar is towards the east. So as you enter the church, you're facing east because that's where Christ will come back from. Biblically, seeing how Christ returns in the east. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact phraseology there. From the inside, here's the rose window on the north. It's big and round, okay? These are called lancet windows. They are like small knives or lancets, okay? Featuring the stained glass of kings, queens. Mary is in the middle of this one. You can see doves. But on the outside, it isn't that glorious, but you go on the inside with the sunlight streaming in, and it is absolutely amazing. From here to here, the diameter is 43 feet. Absolutely amazing. Pace off 43 feet. And it's probably going to be 15 paces across. Very, very astounding. Here's one of the portals, and the book does a good job of talking about the designs of these tympanums. And here's a view inside into the apse. You can see the altar down here. This is the transept. Here's the nave. Okay. And then we'll just touch on Notre Dame. From the outside, there's the two towers. They're actually incomplete, and if you are of the generation with the Disney cartoons of the Hunchback, this is where he's from. We can see the flying buttresses, and Notre Dame is very much known for the flying buttresses. The buttresses were not designed originally on the building, but when the building started being stressed that it might fall down, they had to create something. So they went with this flying buttress. They're very thin, and they're very much away from the building to allow light in to the windows here. And here's a rose window that we can see here on the inside. This one is 42 feet across. Again, featuring Mary in the middle, which you really can't see. And here's the west front. So this faces west. The two towers, the portals, the rose window, all kinds of columns here, again, making it look like Rome, okay? But lots of arches with points on them. And on the inside, we can see that there are pointed arches going upward. Now, Notre Dame is not the biggest or grandest. It's the most famous, probably, and it is somewhat intimate, and it is somewhat dark. Notice it's not very bright, okay? Still have to use a lot of artificial lighting. And probably the grandest of all the Gothic is Sainte-Chapelle. And here it is in Paris, down the street basically, down the island from Notre Dame. And it is nothing but glass. The walls are about 80% glass. And it was just astounding. Even my parents that are not necessarily outwardly Christian thought this was just a glorious place. So I guess the word of the day is glorious. And we'll be back later.